In this video, we are going to play around with EVGA Precision X just a little bit, but first we're going to go through some benchmarks with the 780 Ti at stock clock, or actually at the super clock, which is 980 megahertz, and the boost clock goes far and beyond that, plus you've got GPU's boost 2.0, so it's going to go way up close to 1200 megahertz typically. So we're going to benchmark it like that, and then we're going to go to the GPU offset, and we're going to add 75. We could even add 100, 120, I don't know, we'll play around with this a little bit, but we're going to start off adding 75 and do a bunch of benchmarks there, compare that to the scores, and then I'm going to compare this with an NVIDIA GTX 780. I've got the Direct CU2 edition from Asus, and that's an overclocked card as well. So we'll compare all these numbers and just see how fast this 780 Ti really is, and then we'll see how well it overclocks. Before I go on, one of the things I really like about this card is the fact that they've redone the way the power balancing works. Now, typically with a graphics card, you have power coming from three sources, from the 6-pin PCI Express and the 8-pin PCI Express, or in some cases, two 8-pin PCI Express connectors, power connectors. And then you also have some coming straight from the PCI Express expansion slot, the 16-speed slot, just some power coming straight out of that. Normally, a certain amount of power comes from each, and these factory overclock cards are balanced so that, you know, a certain amount is coming out of each. And then when you start overclocking, it may max out one of those connections. It may max out one, you know, how much power is coming out of the PCI Express slot, for instance, and then that's going to create an unstable overclock, or it just won't work because you've maxed out one power source. Well, now with this graphics card, thanks to the way they've balanced things, it will allow you to draw more from one source than another. If one's depleted or if something's wrong, it basically just keeps power going to the card, giving you more power, and then it balances it so that it's not going to fail. When I'm overclocking this one, I'm really overclocking for the temperature. I'm trying to, you know, keep it below. It's kind of the way I've been doing it, and I've had some success that way. So we'll get to that overclocking in just a minute. First off, let's get into our benchmarks with Bioshock Infinite. So with the 780, the GTX 780, it's the overclocked Direct CU2 edition, Bioshock Infinite at 1440p, everything completely maxed out, DirectX 11. The average was 61.28 frames per second, and the minimum was 46 frames per second. With the 780 Ti, that's the EVGA 780 Ti, 72.12 frames per second, and the minimum was 57, so more than 10 gained on both. Now, Crysis 3, with the 780, I was averaging, this is 1080p maxed out, by the way. 780, I was averaging 35.04 frames per second, and my minimum was 4. Maxed out at 1080p with the 780 Ti, 39.36 frames per second, and the minimum was 34. All right, now let's check this game out at 1440p. The 780, 21.52 frames per second, and the 780 Ti, 24.28 frames per second. This doesn't really work at 1440p maxed out. You got to change the filters and turn a few things down. So yeah, not going to happen. I mean, you can play this game at 4K at medium, turning things down, but not maxed out with all the filters and everything. It just kills everything. All right, let's check out Skyrim, and we did overclock Skyrim. With the 780 at 2400 by 1200 because I like strange resolutions. The average was 39.12 and the minimum was 30. Now this is my version of Skyrim with like 150 mods and a crazy EMB. So this is completely my version, and this is one of the main reasons I got this card, because I wanted to be able to max it out, playing at my resolution, which I love, 2400 by 1200. 780 Ti, 45.48 frames per second, and the minimum was 32. So a slight improvement there. However, this is why I got the card. I got the card to overclock, so when we added the, the 75 extra megahertz to the offset, 47.8 frames per second, and the minimum was 34. You can also add 300 or 400 to the memory clock offset and not cause really any issues with the card, so I did that as well. I added 300 to the memory clock offset there, and this was really no problem at all. It did hit 80, and whenever it hits 82, the fan speed will ramp up. If it gets to 100, it's going to throttle, but it never did. It just would get to like 60 or something. Trying 2 with 780, running at 1440p, completely maxed out, all the filters on crazy people mode. 40.68 frames per second. The minimum was 38. With the 780 Ti, we got 51.28 frames per second, and the minimum was 47. Pretty decent jump up there. Now, overclocked, we were able to push it all the way up to 54.44 frames per second, and the minimum there was 51. All right, Metro Last Light, last game at 1080p, completely maxed out. The average was 35.75 frames per second. The minimum was 14.85 with the GTX 780. Stepping up to the GTX 780 Ti, the superclocked, we were able to get 45.56 frames per second. The minimum was 11 there, so I'm not sure what was going on. With the overclock, we were able to go all the way up to 48.22 frames per second. But again, the minimum was 7.12, so something's up there. I'm running completely ridiculous drivers. In fact, I'll show you right now on the screen what drivers I'm running. 331.70. And if you see the release, nothing's available because I got it from NVIDIA's FTP site just for this graphics card. So I would imagine that as the new graphics cards come out, that the strange, frame rate or frame time issue there, obviously, or whatever the frame drop was there, would be fixed. We did have a decent frame drop with the 780, but not like that. And it seemed like the higher the frequency of the GPU, the worse the frame drop. So it's all pretty interesting. I mean, it's an extremely overclockable card, probably one of the most overclockable cards I've used. It's already like ridiculous. It's already like 100 megahertz up, and I was able to push it like another 100 megahertz. I even had this thing running at 1100 megahertz, which is just absurd. I played in Skyrim for a while and finally started seeing some artifacts, so I may have to tweak it a little bit. The other thing you want to watch is your temperature and your fan speed. I've actually been having a hard time getting an accurate temperature reading because here's what I do. I go and I change the temperature target, and it always wants to do whatever the temperature target is when you're in game. And so I went over and I changed the fan speed, because right now it's on automatic, so the fan speed will go up and down. And even if you overclock, even if you add 100 or whatever, it's going to raise the fan speed up to like 90 so that it can hit 82 degrees. So I was like, all right, let's just get rid of this automatic and let's set like a manual. So I set it at 60. And then when I set it at 60, well, when it got close to 82 degrees, it would throttle this a little bit. So, I mean, this would come down because it always wants to hit this. Also, we do have this. I mean, if you want to do over voltage, you can do this if you want to get really serious. And there's also K-Boost, which pretty much makes it run at full speed at all times, and I don't really use that much. Some people say that it can give them a slight boost in games, but it's going to make your card run hot and at full speed all the time, so I don't really use it that much. And plus, it's so fast already, I don't care. Maybe a few of you guys out there are a bit more hardcore than I am and know some secrets that I don't. I don't know, let me know, guys. Even with the overclock and automatic fan, it was very quiet. It would get up into the 60s and maybe almost 70% with the fan sometimes, depending on what I was doing. But it was still quiet. I mean, it's in a fractal define R4, so it's nice and quiet. And it didn't go above this. It would hit like 83, then come back down to 82. And everything's sort of working together in a symphony here. Last thing I want to mention here is the frame rate target. You turn this on, and if you play an old game, you set your frame rate target to whatever, 30, 60. I like mine set at 60 because my monitor refresh rate is 60. That might change when I get my hands on G-Sync, but for now, set it at 60. This program is getting easier to use every time, by the way. So you open up your program, and let's say I'm playing like Deus Ex or some old game like that, Deus Ex 1, not this new stuff. It will underclock my GPU and only give me enough to get 60 frames a second. And that'll keep things running even cooler, quieter. Fan speed will come down and it'll use less power. So there's a lot you can do with this software. Graphics card's fast as hell, and I'm going to be using it in my personal system. That's pretty much the end of this video. If you guys have questions, you can just click on the screen. It'll take you to our forum. Also, if you want to know where to pick up one of these, or if you want to know the price on one of these, just go ahead and click on the screen, and you can go check out the prices. They're always up to date that way. Yeah. All right, this is the end of the video. So get out of here. Scram. Do people still say scram? I was transported back to the 20s. If you're still here, you really should scram. Bull eggs. Because now it's the next morning. Why are you still watching? Maybe I'm watching you. It's It's not over until I say it's over. That's just awkward. Honk! That's it, we're going together. Where is he?
He lived.
He just walks out of there like a boss.